The wind did not ask permission before it cut across the plain. It came sharp and cold, dragging the smell of dust, sage, and old blood across the land as if the earth itself was remembering something it had tried to forget. Before this story pulls you fully into its grip, before your heart starts riding alongside hooves and shadows, I want you to do one simple thing. If you believe stories should still make you feel something real, if you believe words can still burn and heal at the same time, subscribe to our channel and share this story with your friends. Let them feel it too. Some stories are not meant to be kept alone. The cowboy had crossed many miles without looking back, but that evening his horse slowed on its own, as if the animal sensed what the man did not yet understand. The sky was bruised purple and red, the sun hanging low like a wound that refused to close. Somewhere ahead, a lone figure stood waiting, not pacing, not hiding, not armed in the way men expected, just standing, as still as a prayer that had gone unanswered for too long. The cowboy reined in. His hand hovered near his revolver out of habit, not fear. Fear had burned out of him years ago, back when he learned how easily a man could survive without his soul if he kept moving fast enough. He had been called many things: ranch hand, drifter, killer, hero, coward. But none of them had ever stayed long enough to matter. The Apache lifted his head slowly. His eyes were dark, not with threat, but with depth, like water that had seen too many reflections and remembered all of them. His hair fell loose down his back, silvered not by age alone, but by endurance. The marks on his face were not paint for war. They were scars shaped by time, grief, and survival. "You rode far to outrun yourself," the Apache said quietly. The cowboy swallowed. He did not ask how the man knew him. Out here, the land itself whispered truths to those who listened. "I didn't come looking for trouble," the cowboy replied. The Apache nodded once. "Trouble is a thing that looks for men who pretend they are empty." A silence fell, thick and alive. Coyotes howled in the distance, not hungry but watchful. The cowboy dismounted. His boots touched the ground like a confession. "What do you want?" he asked. The Apache stepped closer. Close enough now that the cowboy could see the fine lines around his eyes, lines carved by laughter long buried in pain never spoken. "Let me feel everything," the Apache said. "That is what I want." The words hit the cowboy harder than any bullet ever had. He had survived gunfights, stampedes, nights so cold they cracked men open from the inside. But those words, simple, naked, honest, left him speechless. The Apache gestured toward the horizon. "Walk with me." Against every instinct he had learned, the cowboy followed. They walked until the stars woke fully, until the land seemed to breathe around them. The Apache spoke of his people, not in anger, not in pleading, but in memory. He spoke of rivers that once sang louder, of children who learned the names of birds before they learned fear, of elders who taught that pain must be felt or it would rot the spirit from within. "You cowboys," the Apache said softly, "you learn to run from feeling. You learn to turn grief into gun smoke and whiskey. We were taught to sit with it, to let it pass through us like fire through dry grass." The cowboy felt something stir in his chest, something he had buried under years of dust and distance. "Feeling everything," he muttered. "That sounds like a good way to die." The Apache smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, truthfully. "No," he said, "it is the only way to live." The night deepened, and with it, the weight of unspoken things. The cowboy thought of the woman he had loved once, the child he never met, the men he had killed, and the parts of himself that died with them. He had never allowed himself to feel those losses. He had survived by turning away. And now, standing beside this man who carried his pain openly like a scarred banner, the cowboy felt the first crack in his armor. They stopped near a circle of stones blackened by old fires. The Apache sat, motioning for the cowboy to do the same. Without ceremony, he began a song. Low, broken, beautiful. It was not meant to entertain, it was meant to remember. The cowboy's throat tightened. He did not know the words, but his body understood the weight of them. Tears came before he realized what was happening. He did not wipe them away. For the first time in years, he let himself feel everything. Morning came slow and pale, as if the sun itself was unsure it had the right to rise after what had been shared in the dark. The cowboy woke near the dying embers of the fire, his face stiff with dried tears, his chest aching in a way that felt strangely clean. For a moment he panicked. Fear clawed up his spine like an old reflex, feeling this much hurt. Then he remembered the Apache's voice. Let it pass through you. The Apache was already awake, feeding the fire, his movements steady and deliberate. He looked at the cowboy and nodded, not as a teacher, not as a judge, but as an equal. You stayed, he said. The cowboy sat up slowly, didn't know how to leave. That is how it begins, the Apache replied. They ate in silence. The land seemed closer now, more intimate. Every sound felt sharper, every color deeper. The cowboy realized how long he had been moving through the world, half dead, half asleep. You know they won't let this stand, the cowboy said eventually. Men like me, men like you, this land. The Apache met his gaze. I know. The cowboy hesitated, then spoke the words that surprised even himself. I can help. The Apache studied him for a long moment. Help is not the same as redemption. I know, the cowboy said. I'm not looking for clean hands, just honest ones. What followed was not a grand battle or a single heroic stand. It was something harder. They rode together through settlements where hatred wore the mask of law. They spoke to men who had forgotten how to listen. They buried the dead and sat with the grieving. The cowboy learned to lower his gun and raise his voice, learned that courage was not only found in violence but in vulnerability. There were nights when the cowboy nearly broke, nights when the weight of feeling everything crushed him so hard he thought he might shatter. Each time the Apache sat with him, silent and present, teaching without words. Pain does not disappear when you ignore it, the Apache said once. It becomes something else. The cowboy nodded, understanding too late how much damage he had already done by refusing to feel. When the end came, it did not come quietly. Soldiers rode in with fear behind their eyes and orders they did not question. The Apache stood his ground. The cowboy stood beside him. You don't have to do this, the cowboy whispered. The Apache looked at him with pride and sadness woven together. I already did, he said. The moment I chose to feel everything. The shots rang out like thunder tearing the sky apart. When the dust settled, the Apache lay still, his face peaceful, his body finally free of the weight it had carried for so long. The cowboy knelt beside him, tears falling openly now, unashamed. He did not run. He did not reach for his gun. He stayed. He felt everything. Years later, people would speak of a cowboy who laid down his weapon and picked up stories instead. A man who told of an Apache who taught him how to live by teaching him how to feel. Children would listen wide-eyed, elders would nod quietly, and the land would remember. The grave was shallow, not out of disrespect, but because the land itself resisted being cut too deeply. The cowboy understood that now. Some earth does not want to be wounded any more than it already has been. He dug with his hands when the shovel struck stone, his fingers bleeding, his breath breaking because it felt wrong to stop when the pain finally meant something. The Apache lay wrapped in his own blanket, the old one stitched and mended so many times it looked like a map of serve. Eval. The cowboy lowered him gently, as if the man were only sleeping and might wake if handled too roughly. When the body touched the earth, something inside the cowboy collapsed completely, not loudly, not dramatically, but like a wall that had been holding back a flood for too many years. He stayed there long after the sun climbed high and the flies came and went. He spoke to the grave, not with words meant for comfort, but with honesty stripped raw. He told the Apache everything he had never said to anyone, about the first man he killed, about the scream that followed him into his dreams, about the child's shoe he once found after a raid and could never bring himself to throw away. He told him about the nights he drank himself into forgetting and the mornings he woke up disappointed that he was still alive. "I felt it," he whispered, voice shaking. "Like you said, I felt everything." The wind moved through the grass, slow and steady, not answering, not denying, just present. When he finally stood, his legs nearly gave out. He took a handful of dirt and pressed it to his chest before letting it fall back to the ground. There was no prayer he knew that could fit what had happened. So he mounted his horse and rode, not away, but forward, into a future that no longer felt like an escape. Word traveled faster than he did. It always did. By the time he reached the first settlement, eyes followed him with a different weight. He saw it in the way men straightened, in the way women pulled children closer without knowing why. Something about him had changed. He was no longer sealed shut. He was open, and openness frightened people who survived by closing themselves off. A man stepped into his path near the saloon, deputy badge, dusty coat, hand hovering near his holster. "You're the one," the deputy said. It wasn't a question. The cowboy nodded. "I don't deny what I am." The deputy frowned. "They say you stood with him." "I did. They say you didn't fight back." The cowboy met his gaze. "I didn't." The deputy studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Best keep moving." Inside the saloon, the noise felt unbearable. Laughter scraped against his nerves. The smell of whiskey turned his stomach. He ordered water. The bartender blinked, surprised, then shrugged and poured. As he drank, fragments of the Apache's words returned to him, not as echoes, but as instructions written into his bones. "Feel this. Let it pass. Don't turn away." A man laughed too loudly behind him. Another cursed. A woman cried quietly at a corner table. The cowboy felt it all hit him at once, a crushing wave of human weight. For a moment, panic surged. This was why he had run before. This was why men built walls. He stayed. That night, a fight broke out. It always did. A drunk reached for him, mistaking calm for weakness. The cowboy disarmed him without striking, holding the man until his anger burned itself out. When he let go, the drunk collapsed, sobbing lick. "A child." The room went silent. "He didn't even hit him," someone whispered. The cowboy left without a word. Days turned into weeks. He rode from place to place, not chasing work, not fleeing ghosts, but listening. He listened to widows, to tired soldiers, to farmers watching their land dry and crack. He told them stories. Not polished ones, not heroic ones, but true ones, about an Apache who chose to feel everything. About what it cost, about what it gave. Laughed at him, some spat. Some sat quietly, eyes wet, hands shaking. One night, under a sky split by lightning, a young boy asked him, "Does it hurt? Feeling everything?" The cowboy crouched to the boy's level. "Yes," he said, "it hurts like hell." The boy waited. "But it hurts less than being empty," the cowboy added. The boy nodded, as if that answer had been waiting for him. Not everyone welcomed this new way of being. There were men who saw danger in a cowboy who didn't draw his gun, in stories that made people restless with their own buried pain. Whispers spread, then orders. They came for him at dawn. 4 riders, rifles ready, faces hard with certainty borrowed from someone else. The cowboy stepped out into the morning light, unarmed. "You're stirring things up," the leader said. "I'm telling the truth," the cowboy replied. The leader sneered. "Same thing far as I'm concerned." The cowboy thought of the Apache's last look. Not fear, not regret, acceptance. He closed his eyes. Then something unexpected happened. The shots never came. A woman stepped forward from behind the riders. Then another, then an old man with shaking hands, people the cowboy had listened to, people who had listened back. "No," the woman said, "you're not taking him. The riders hesitated. Fear flickered, not of guns, but of numbers, of something they didn't understand. The leader spat and signaled retreat. "This ain't over." "No," the cowboy said softly, "it isn't." That night, as he sat by a fire surrounded by strangers who felt like family, he spoke the Apache's words again. "Let me feel everything." He didn't say who they belonged to. He didn't need to. If this story is burning inside you right now, if you feel something shifting, don't let it fade when the screen goes dark. Subscribe to our channel and share this story with your friends. Stories like this don't survive unless they're carried forward by people brave enough to feel them. The cowboy looked up at the stars, the same stars the Apache had once looked at, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of what he felt. He welcomed it.